Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The castle stood silent beneath the rain. Its towers, proud and watchful, loomed like ancient sentinels against a shrouded sky. The war was over, at least that was what everyone kept saying. Yet in the hollow corridors of Hogwarts, the echoes of battle still whispered and the stones remembered. Professor Minerva McGonagall stood at the window of her office, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her. The flickering torches cast long shadows over parchment and quill, over letters she had written and rewritten half a dozen times. Her gaze wandered over the grounds, over the greenhouses lit faintly by Neville Longbottom's lamp, over the lake that reflected nothing but storm clouds. It was strange, she thought, to feel so heavy after victory. The castle had been saved, the darkness defeated, and yet Hogwarts felt wounded still. A sudden crack of thunder made her flinch. Her wand twitched instinctively toward the door. Too many nights had taught her that loud noises meant danger. She exhaled slowly, scolding herself. "Honestly, Minerva," she muttered, "you're jumping at shadows." But perhaps shadows were worth fearing. Strange things had begun happening within the castle's foundations. Small tremors, objects moving on their own, odd lights flickering in empty corridors. At first, the staff assumed it was residual magic from the battle, spells and curses lingering like ghosts in the air. But that had been months ago, and still the disturbances grew stronger. Earlier that day, one of the suits of armor outside the Great Hall had started speaking in riddles before collapsing into a heap of molten metal. The energy readings Filch's old instruments had detected afterward were unlike anything the professors recognized. Now, as McGonagall stood alone in her office, she could feel it again. A faint vibration in the floor beneath her feet, like the castle itself was breathing. There was a soft knock at the door. "Enter," she called. The door opened and Neville Longbottom stepped in, rain dripping from his cloak. His expression was weary but earnest, as always. "Evening, Professor," he said, a touch hesitant. "Sorry to disturb you." "Not at all, Neville," she said warmly. "You look like you've been through a storm." "I have," he replied, setting down his satchel. "Something's happened in the greenhouses. The earth started shaking, only for a moment, but it was strong enough to crack a few pots. And, well, there was something else, a sound, like a heartbeat." McGonagall's eyes sharpened. "A heartbeat?" He nodded. "Coming from the ground. I could feel it too. It was faint but steady." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the patter of rain. "This is the third report this week," McGonagall said quietly. "The castle grows restless." Neville frowned. "You think it's the aftermath of the war? Perhaps. Or perhaps something older has been stirred awake." She turned toward the window again, where lightning split the sky above the forbidden forest. Hogwarts was built upon layers of enchantment, far older than any of us. When so much powerful magic is unleashed, especially the kind we witnessed during the battle, it can rouse unpredictable forces. Neville hesitated. Should we alert the Ministry? McGonagall's lips thinned. No. They would only interfere. Hogwarts has stood for nearly 1,000 years, Neville. It has survived wars, betrayals, and worse. We will see to this ourselves." He nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "What do you need me to do?" "Meet me in the dungeons tomorrow night," she said, "after curfew. Bring your wand and a strong heart." Neville managed a nervous smile. "I've faced worse than dark basements, Professor." "I'm counting on that," she said with a rare twinkle. After he left, McGonagall extinguished the torches with a wave of her wand. Darkness fell across the office, broken only by the faint shimmer of the storm outside. She turned her gaze to the portrait of Albus Dumbledore that hung behind her desk. The painted headmaster was dozing lightly, half smiling even in sleep. "I wish you were here, Albus," she whispered. "You'd have known what to make of this." Dumbledore stirred, his painted eyes opening. "My dear Minerva," he said gently, "it seems I rarely am where I am most needed." She couldn't help but smile. "That much hasn't changed." "Whatever stirs beneath the castle," Dumbledore said softly, "take care. Hogwarts protects its own, but it also remembers everything that happens within its walls." McGonagall inclined her head. "I intend to remember as well." The portrait's eyes twinkled briefly before closing once more. When she turned back toward the window, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a pale wash of moonlight over the grounds. Somewhere deep beneath the castle, far below stone and root, something stirred, something vast and ancient, beating faintly like the pulse of the earth itself. And as the moonlight touched the walls of Hogwarts for just a heartbeat, the stones seemed to glow. The castle was awake, and it was waiting. The next evening arrived cloaked in a mist that clung to the castle walls like breath on glass. Candles flickered along the corridors, their flames bending in strange drafts, as if stirred by unseen movement. The students were in their dormitories, lulled into uneasy dreams by the sound of rain tapping at the windows. Hogwarts slept, or pretended to. Minerva McGonagall descended the spiral staircase from her office, her emerald robes sweeping the steps behind her. The air grew colder as she neared the dungeons. She carried her wand alight, the narrow beam of light trembling against the ancient stones. Waiting for her near the entrance to the Slytherin corridor stood Neville Longbottom, clutching his wand with both hands. His hair was damp, his robes streaked with soil from the greenhouses. "Good evening, Professor," he said, his voice low. "Evening, Neville. Ready?" "As I'll ever be." Together they moved deeper into the bowels of the castle, the light dimmed to a greenish hue, shadows shifting like ink along the walls. McGonagall's wand light passed over cracked tiles, dripping arches, and the faint shimmer of runes carved centuries ago. "Strange," Neville murmured. "I've been down here before, helping Professor Slughorn, but I don't remember it feeling quite like this." "The castle changes," McGonagall replied quietly. "Its magic is alive, responsive. If something is wrong, the very walls will know." They reached the lowest level of the dungeons, where the air hung heavy with moisture and the faint smell of earth. A corridor stretched before them, one seldom used since the war. The floor trembled faintly beneath their feet, one beat, then another, like a slow, rhythmic pulse. Neville's hand tightened around his wand. That sound again. McGonagall knelt, pressing her palm to the cold stone. She could feel it, faint but undeniable. "It's coming from below," she murmured, "deeper than the foundations." A sudden rush of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing Neville's light. He gasped, quickly relighting it. Did you feel that? Before McGonagall could answer, the wall to their right gave a deep, grinding groan. The stones shifted, sliding apart, as if stirred by invisible hands. Dust billowed into the air, and an opening revealed itself, an archway leading down into utter blackness. Neville stared. That wasn't there before. No, McGonagall said grimly. It seems we've been invited. She raised her wand, and they descended through the arch. The stairway spiraled sharply downward, narrow and steep. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing in the dark. The heartbeat grew louder with every step. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern lit by a faint green luminescence seeping from the walls themselves. At the center of the chamber stood a pool of still water, perfectly round, its surface gleaming like black glass. "This isn't on any of the maps," Neville whispered. "It's older than the maps," McGonagall replied. "Older than the school itself, I suspect." She approached the pool cautiously. The light from her wand shimmered across the surface, revealing faint symbols carved into the stone rim, runes of protection and binding. Some glowed weakly, their magic flickering like dying embers. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "These are the work of Helga Hufflepuff," she said softly. "Her mark is clear. She was the one who sealed this place." Neville crouched beside her, tracing the faded runes with his gaze. "But why?" Before she could answer, the pool rippled. A faint mist rose from its surface, twisting into a faint, shimmering form, a shadow of a face, distant and sorrowful. The voice that followed was no louder than a breath. "Minerva." Neville staggered back. "And did that just—" "Yes," McGonagall said sharply, her heart pounding. She took a step forward. "Who are you?" The mist swirled again, the face forming more clearly now. It was not someone she recognized. "The castle remembers," it whispered. "The war awoke the deep magic. It stirs what was bound." "What was bound?" she demanded. The voice trembled. "The heart beneath Hogwarts. The living stone. It beats again, but uncontrolled. It will consume all." Then the mist collapsed into itself, vanishing. The water stilled. The faint heartbeat below grew stronger, thudding like a drum in the deep. Neville swallowed hard. "What was that?" McGonagall turned, eyes fierce. "A warning. Something ancient has reawakened beneath us." A sudden crack echoed through the chamber. The runes around the pool flared and shattered, scattering sparks of gold and green light. The water surged upward, twisting into a column that struck the ceiling before falling back with a hiss of steam. "Move!" McGonagall cried, pulling Neville aside as a crack split the floor. The tremor subsided after a moment, but the damage was clear. The binding runes were gone, their power broken. The heartbeat now pulsed with terrible strength, the sound vibrating through the stone itself. Neville's voice shook. "Professor, if those runes were holding something back—" "They were," she said grimly, "and now it's free." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then McGonagall straightened, her face set with quiet resolve. "We must restore the seals before it spreads. The castle's life is tied to its foundation. If the heart collapses, so will Hogwarts." Neville nodded, swallowing his fear. "Tell me what to do." She turned toward the archway, where faint cracks of light now ran through the stones, pulsing with each beat. "We will need old magic, older than any spell in our books. I'll have to consult the Founder's archives." "Where are they?" "In the headmistress's study," she said, "hidden behind the portrait of Godric Gryffindor. Only a handful of people even know they exist." They began to climb the stairs once more, their footsteps echoing through the dark. The air was trembling now, the heartbeat echoing faintly through every wall. Halfway up, Neville paused. "Professor, do you think the castle could die?" McGonagall stopped, her expression unreadable. "Everything living can die, Neville, even magic." They emerged at last into the corridor above, gasping slightly from the climb. The air felt colder now, the torches burning with a strange greenish hue. As they made their way toward the upper floors, they passed a row of portraits, each of them stirring, whispering anxiously among themselves. "The walls are humming," said a painted knight, clutching his sword. "The stones sing with dread." "Quiet, you fool," hissed another. "Can't you feel it? The castle's waking heart." McGonagall didn't slow. "Keep the portraits calm," she said to them. "Panic will help no one." But as she and Neville ascended the grand staircase, a deep rumble shook the castle again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Far below in the dungeons, something vast and unseen began to move, and for the first time in centuries, the portraits of the founders themselves, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, opened their eyes. The castle's heart was no longer sleeping, it was awake. The following day dawned gray and cold, the mist still curling around the towers like pale smoke. McGonagall had not slept. The echoes of what she and Neville had seen beneath the castle haunted her thoughts, each memory sharp as a knife. When she stood at her office window, she could feel it again, the faint rhythmic tremor underfoot, steady and relentless. She turned from the window and faced the portrait of Godric Gryffindor. The painted founder stood tall, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that gleamed with painted light. "I need access to the founder's archives," McGonagall said. Gryffindor's painted eyes met hers, bright with courage even after all the centuries. "So it has begun again," he said, his deep voice solemn. "The heart stirs. You know of it?" "All the founders did," he replied. "It was Rowena who discovered it, Helga who bound it, and Salazar who feared it most. The living stone, the pulse of the castle itself. We sealed it beneath the earth before it could consume the magic it fed upon." McGonagall's expression tightened. "The seal is broken." Gryffindor nodded gravely. "Then you will need what we left behind." He lifted his sword and traced a line across the painted air. The portrait shimmered, and with a low rumble, a hidden door appeared in the wall behind him. The chamber beyond was narrow, lit by blue witchlight. Dust lay thick upon the floor, and shelves of old scrolls and tomes lined the stone walls. McGonagall stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of ancient parchment. Neville waited by the doorway, watching her carefully. "You think the answer's here?" "If not here, then nowhere," she replied. She began searching through the shelves, her wand light gliding over brittle scrolls marked in faded ink. Some were written in Latin, others in older tongues, but all bore the same seal, a circle of 4, the sigils of the founders entwined. She pulled free a bundle bound in black ribbon and set it upon the desk. The parchment crackled as she unrolled it. "The Binding of the Heart," she read aloud, "by Helga Hufflepuff." Neville leaned closer, eyes wide. "It's her handwriting?" "Yes," McGonagall whispered. "And look, these runes, the same as those around the pool." The text spoke of a living magic born from the land itself, drawn into being when the castle was raised. The founders had discovered that Hogwarts possessed a core of pure enchantment, an energy that grew stronger as the school did. but such power was dangerous. It began to draw from the wizards within its walls, feeding on their emotions, their triumphs and grief. Helga had bound it beneath the castle, forming a network of wards that calmed its hunger. Yet her notes grew darker toward the end. "If the bonds be broken," she'd written, "the heart shall beat anew. And should it wake unbound, it shall drink the magic of Hogwarts till nothing remains but hollow stone." Neville straightened, his face pale. "So it's feeding again?" "Yes," McGonagall said grimly. "It draws strength from us, from every charm cast, every spell spoken. Then every bit of magic we use makes it stronger." She closed the scroll with a snap. "We must restore the wards." "How?" She glanced at another scroll beside it, sealed in blue wax. It bore Rowena Ravenclaw's sigil. "With the Founder's key," she murmured. "Each Founder left a fragment of their power hidden within the castle. To restore the wards, we must reunite all four." Neville's brow furrowed. "4 relics?" "Yes. Gryffindor's sword, Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diadem." She hesitated, her mouth tightening. "And Slytherin's locket." Neville swallowed. "But most of those are gone." "Not all," McGonagall said. "The sword still rests within Hogwarts, returned by the goblins after the battle. As for the others," she met his eyes, "we will have to find what remains." Thunder rolled across the sky outside. The window panes rattled. Somewhere deep beneath the floor, a low moan rose, a sound like stone grinding against stone. "The heart grows restless," she said. "We haven't much time." They left the chamber together, the hidden door sealing behind them. As they crossed the corridor, portraits whispered urgently from their frames. One painted witch cried out, "Headmistress! The staircases are moving on their own!" McGonagall quickened her pace. "The magic's reaching upward," she said. "It's spreading through the castle." By the time they reached the great hall, chaos had already begun. The enchanted ceiling flickered like a stormy sky, lightning arcing between clouds of conjured magic. The long tables trembled, their goblets rattling as the floor vibrated with the steady pulse of the heart below. Students huddled together, frightened. Professor Flitwick stood atop a bench, shouting levitation charms to hold the falling candles in place. Hagrid was near the entrance, shielding a group of first years beneath his great coat. McGonagall's voice rose over the din. "All students to their dormitories. Professors maintain order." Her command cut through the panic. The older students began ushering the younger ones toward the doors. Neville rushed to help, his wand flickering with nonverbal charms that steadied the trembling chandeliers. Once the hall was clear, McGonagall turned to the staff. "Whatever lies beneath us is awakened fully. The castle itself is turning unstable." Flitwick's eyes were wide. "Minerva, the wards around the school are fluctuating. I can feel them unraveling. If the heart feeds on magic, how can we reinforce them without making it worse?" "By using the Founder's relics," she replied. "Each one holds self-sustaining enchantments, not drawn from our own power." Slughorn frowned. "And where do you suppose we'll find Slytherin's locket? It was destroyed. Potter himself told us so." "Perhaps," McGonagall said quietly, "but remnants of its power may remain. Horcruxes leave traces that cannot be wholly undone." A heavy silence followed. Then Hagrid, still kneeling beside the doors, said in his low rumble, "If you're going after the relics, you'll be needing help." McGonagall shook her head. "The castle cannot be left unguarded. I'll take Neville with me. The rest of you must protect the students. The professors nodded reluctantly. Within minutes, she and Neville were crossing the rain-soaked grounds toward the forbidden forest. The wind whipped at their cloaks, and the torches along the path flickered wildly. Somewhere behind them, lightning illuminated the towers, and for an instant, McGonagall thought she saw something stirring within the highest window of the astronomy tower, a flicker of green light that pulsed in time with the heartbeat. Neville glanced back. It's spreading faster. Yes, she said, which means we start with the sword. The first key lies where it was born, within the chamber of Gryffindor itself. The chamber of... But where? She gave a thin smile. Even after all these years, the castle keeps her secrets. Follow me. And together they vanished into the shadows of the night as Hogwarts trembled behind them, its living heart pounding louder and louder beneath the stone. The storm had not yet lifted when McGonagall and Neville crossed the grounds toward the far side of the castle. Their boots sank into the sodden earth, the grass slick with rain. Thunder rumbled overhead, echoing across the black lake whose waters gleamed faintly with the reflected glow of lightning. The ancient walls of Hogwarts loomed behind them, streaked with rain, the windows glinting with feverish light. McGonagall led with purpose, her wand raised high. The chamber of Gryffindor lies beneath the West Tower, she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the rain. Few have entered it since the days of Dumbledore, and fewer still have left with knowledge of its secrets. Neville followed close, his cloak clinging to him, his breath misting in the cold. You mean to say there's another chamber, like the Chamber of Secrets? Older than that, McGonagall replied. Every founder carved a refuge into the foundations of the school, not for hiding, but for safeguarding their relics. Gryffindor's chamber was built to house his sword, when it was not in the hands of a worthy witch or wizard. They reached a small courtyard choked with ivy and moss, one seldom trodden even by students in their most daring escapades. At its center stood a weathered stone statue of a lion, its mane crowned with lichen, its eyes blind from centuries of rain. McGonagall halted before it. Here, she said softly, the entrance lies beneath. Neville glanced around uncertainly. I don't see... Step back. She raised her wand and whispered an incantation so old that even the air seemed to hesitate before obeying. Golden light flowed from the wand's tip, tracing a circle around the statue's base. The lion's eyes blazed to life with crimson fire, and the ground shuddered. The cobblestones split open with a grinding sound, revealing a staircase descending into the earth. Neville's eyes widened. Merlin's beard, stay close, she said. The enchantments here are loyal only to Gryffindor's spirit. They will not harm us if we mean no deceit. They descended, the stone steps slick and narrow, spiraling down into darkness. The air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of iron and dust. Far below, a faint red glow shimmered, pulsing like the ember of a dying forge. At last they stepped into a great circular hall. The walls were carved with scenes of battle, lions and serpents, swords and flames. At the center, upon a dais of blackened rock, rested the sword of Gryffindor itself. It gleamed with quiet majesty, its blade catching the crimson light from a brazier that burned with no fuel. Neville breathed out slowly. It's beautiful. McGonagall approached with reverent caution. The sword radiated strength, an aura of valor and fire that seemed to hum in the air. Crafted by goblins, "Tempered in the blood of monsters," she murmured. "This blade has seen centuries of courage." But as she reached for it, the brazier's flame flared violently, the walls groaned, and the carvings began to move, the lions stepping from the stone, their eyes blazing gold. "Professor," Neville started forward, but McGonagall held up a hand. "They test us," she said firmly. "Stand still." The lions circled them, massive shapes of molten stone and light. Their voices came as one, deep and resonant. "Who seeks the blade of Gryffindor?" "I am Minerva McGonagall, headmistress of Hogwarts," she declared, her voice steady. "I seek not to wield it, but to restore what was broken, to protect the castle it once defended." The lion's eyes flickered. "And this one?" they asked, turning toward Neville. He swallowed but did not flinch. Neville Longbottom, former student and friend to Hogwarts. For a long moment the lions were silent. Then one stepped forward, its body blazing brighter. "Courage is not absence of fear, but mastery of it. Prove you remember this." The chamber trembled, and suddenly the floor beneath Neville gave way. He fell with a cry, plunging into darkness. "Neville!" McGonagall shouted, racing to the edge. Her light pierced the chasm below. There he was, standing in a smaller chamber, wand raised, surrounded by shadows, shaped like his younger self. Trembling and uncertain, the illusions whispered to him. His failures, his fears, his doubts from years past. The trembling boy who could never remember a spell, the student who watched others fight braver battles. McGonagall could only watch as Neville faced them. His wand hand shook, but then he lifted his chin. "You're not me anymore," he said, voice firm. "I've stood against worse than my own fear." He swung his wand in a sharp arc. "Ridiculous!" Light burst from the tip, sweeping through the chamber. The shadows vanished like smoke, leaving the air calm and still. The floor rose beneath him, rejoining the upper hall. The lions bowed low before them both, their forms softening back into stone. "Courage proven. Take the blade." McGonagall stepped forward and laid her hand upon the hilt. It felt warm, alive, and as she lifted it from the dais, a current of power surged through the air. The brazier's fire blazed higher, and the carvings upon the walls glowed bright as sunrise. The sword shimmered, not just silver, but streaked with faint crimson veins of light. Its edge sang faintly, a sound like triumph remembered. She turned to Neville. "The first key is ours." But even as she spoke, the ground quivered again, more violently this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. From far above came a deep, echoing roar, the sound of stone collapsing. Neville's expression turned grim. That came from the castle. They fled up the staircase, the walls shuddering around them. When they emerged into the courtyard once more, the night sky was alive with motion. Hogwarts glowed faintly with an otherworldly light, the very towers pulsing like veins of living magic. From the great hall came shouts and the flicker of spells. A section of the astronomy tower had cracked open near its base, and through the rift poured green light that pulsed with the same terrible rhythm as the heart below. McGonagall gripped the sword tightly. "It's spreading faster than I feared." "What do we do?" Neville asked. She looked toward the forest, where the trees shuddered as though the ground itself throbbed with pain. "Next," she said, her voice fierce, "we go to the heart of Hufflepuff, the place where the binding began." The sword gleamed in her hand, reflecting the wild light of the storm. The wind tore through the courtyard, scattering leaves and rain. Hogwarts was no longer merely trembling. It was calling, and somewhere deep within its living stone, a heartbeat answered. The rain had ceased by dawn, but the air around Hogwarts felt charged, alive with the strange pulse of buried magic. Mist coiled low across the grounds, veiling the castle's trembling shadow. From the windows, light flickered unevenly, as though the torches themselves were uncertain whether to burn or fade. McGonagall and Neville strode through the dew-laden grass, the sword of Gryffindor strapped across her back beneath her cloak. Neither had spoken much since the chamber. Both knew what awaited them next would demand more than courage. Hufflepuff's heart lies in the lower fields, McGonagall said at last, near the old well that hasn't run since before you were born. Helga chose it for its earth, the richest soil on the grounds. She said the strength of Hogwarts grew from that place. Neville nodded. His eyes lingered on the castle behind them. I can feel it, he said softly. It's like the ground itself is breathing. They passed beneath the shadow of the greenhouses. The glass panes shivered as they walked by, plants inside swaying though there was no wind. The earth trembled faintly beneath their boots, and when they reached the hollow, by the ancient well, the air was thick with quiet energy. The well stood crooked and overgrown, its stones slick with moss. Vines of creeping ivy twined around its rim, and the bucket that once hung from its rope was long decayed. This is the place, McGonagall murmured. The heart of Hufflepuff. Neville crouched, brushing away vines. I can feel magic in the soil. It's warm. Yes, she said, her eyes narrowing. It's trying to rise. She drew her wand, pointing it toward the well. Revelare. A golden shimmer ran over the stones, illuminating faint runes hidden beneath centuries of grime. The light deepened, and a circle of sigils flared in the grass around them, faded, cracked, yet still alive. Helga's binding ring, McGonagall said. This is where the seal began. Neville looked around uneasily. If the runes are this weak, they will fail soon, she finished grimly, unless we restore them. As she spoke, a tremor ran through the ground. From the darkness of the well came a faint, steady sound. Thump, thump, like the slow beating of a heart. The grass at their feet began to wither in patches. McGonagall knelt, setting the sword beside her. Hufflepuff's relic was her cup, she said, a vessel of life and renewal. It must be used to rekindle the ring. Neville frowned. But the cup, it was destroyed with the other Horcruxes. Destroyed, yes, she said, but power like that never vanishes completely. It lingers. And where would remnants of Helga's magic remain, if not in the soil she blessed? She pressed her hand to the ground, closing her eyes. Stand back. Neville obeyed. The air thickened around her, shimmering faintly. She whispered words older than Latin, older than Hogwarts itself. Golden light spread from her fingertips, threading through the soil, tracing the broken runes one by one. The earth responded. The vines along the well writhed, pulling themselves free and curling toward the ring. Flowers bloomed and died in moments. A faint outline appeared beside her hand, a ghostly cup, transparent and luminous, forming from mist. There, McGonagall breathed, Hufflepuff's gift endures. Neville's eyes widened. It's beautiful. But as they watched, the golden glow flickered and then darkened. The heartbeat below grew louder, faster. The earth shuddered violently, and a fissure split across the ring, spilling black light like smoke. No! McGonagall cried. She thrust her wand into the soil, struggling to hold the seal. The phantom cup trembled, flickering between gold and shadow. From the crack rose a whispering voice, cold and formless. "You cannot bind what was never meant to sleep." Neville staggered back, his wand raised. "Professor, it's speaking." McGonagall gritted her teeth. "Ignore it!" She forced more power into her spell, the runes flaring brighter, but the darkness resisted. The voice deepened, echoing through the air. "You feed me with your strength, witch. The more you fight, the stronger I grow." Neville knelt beside her. "There must be another way." Her eyes darted toward the sword lying on the grass. The crimson veins along its blade pulsed in rhythm with the earth's tremor. "The sword," she whispered, "it's goblin-made. It absorbs what strengthens it." Understanding flashed across Neville's face. If it can take the venom of a basilisk, maybe it can take this magic too. "Exactly." She seized the hilt and drove the sword into the soil at the center of the ring. The ground erupted in a burst of blinding gold. The black light surged toward the blade, coiling like smoke drawn into a flame. The heartbeat roared, then faltered. For a long moment, all was light and sound. Then the tremor ceased. When the glow faded, the ground was still. The well stood silent once more, and the runes along the grass burned faintly, restored to their former radiance. Neville lowered his wand. Did it work? McGonagall drew the sword from the earth. Its surface shimmered with new light. Streaks of gold now mingled with the crimson veins. "The ring is sealed," she said, "but not for long. The heart resists. It will find another weakness soon." Neville wiped his brow. 2 keys down, 2 to go. She nodded. "The next lies in Ravenclaw's domain." Her gaze turned toward the distant castle towers, where the highest spire gleamed faintly against the morning mist. "The diadem," Neville frowned. "But the diadem was destroyed too." "I know," she said, "but like the cup, echoes remain. Rowena's wisdom was never merely in the crown. It was in the knowledge she left behind." A low hum filled the air then, so faint it was almost a vibration. The ground beneath their feet trembled once, twice. The rune circle flickered, its light dimming again for a heartbeat before steadying. Neville swallowed. "It's not finished with us." "No," McGonagall said, staring toward the castle. "The heart beneath Hogwarts will not rest until it has all the magic it desires." As they started back toward the castle, the morning mist began to twist into strange shapes, faces and forms that vanished when looked at directly. The castle loomed ahead, its towers pulsing faintly with light like veins of a living thing. The portraits along the lower halls were awake when they returned. The painted witches and wizards murmured warnings as they passed. "It grows restless," cried one of the fat friars' neighboring monks. "The castle dreams, but the dream turns dark." "Enough," McGonagall said, her voice ringing with command. "The staff will hold their positions. No one is to use unnecessary magic within the castle walls." The portraits fell silent, though unease rippled through them. Neville glanced at her. "And if the students sense it too?" "They will," she said, "but we must keep them calm. The heart feeds on chaos." They reached the stairway leading to the upper floors. The air was colder here, thinner. The castle's magic pressed close, alive and listening. As they climbed, the faint hum returned, no longer from the ground but from above, a strange crystalline tone like wind over glass. McGonagall's eyes lifted to the great tower ahead. "Ravenclaw's legacy waits," she said softly. and with it, perhaps, the truth of what the castle has become. Lightning flashed across the high windows. For a brief instant, the glass seemed to reflect not their faces, but those of the four founders, watching in silence as their school trembled toward awakening. Night had settled again over the castle, but no peace came with it. The very air within Hogwarts was alive, whispering through the halls as though the stones themselves were murmuring. Windows fogged over without reason, torches burned low though untouched, and an uneasy quiet had taken hold of the students. McGonagall walked swiftly through the deserted corridors, her robes whispering behind her. Neville kept close, his eyes scanning every shifting shadow. The portraits watched them pass, their painted faces anxious. Some whispered blessings, others turned away, as though afraid to see what might follow. The staircase leading to the Ravenclaw Tower was longer than Neville remembered, each step ringing with a faint, hollow echo. Halfway up, a chill wind swept through, carrying with it the scent of parchment and rain. Ravenclaw's legacy has always been intellect, McGonagall murmured as they climbed. Wisdom is her weapon, not fire or earth or heart. If the diadem is truly gone, her chamber will test us in other ways. Neville tried a faint smile. So no sword fights this time? Let us hope not, she replied, though her tone was wary. At the landing stood the bronze eagle door knocker, gleaming faintly in the wandlight. It turned toward them as they approached. To enter, it said, its voice echoing through the stairwell. Answer me this. What is greater than knowledge, yet feared by the wise? Neville glanced at McGonagall uncertainly. Another riddle? She frowned, thinking. What is greater than knowledge? She murmured, then softly, wisdom, the understanding of when to use it. The eagle's eyes glowed faintly blue. Enter Minerva McGonagall, it said, and the friend who stands unafraid beside you. The door swung open. They stepped into the Ravenclaw common room. The wide circular chamber was silent, bathed in pale moonlight from the arched windows. The stars outside shimmered faintly through the mist. Books and parchment lay scattered on the floor, as though left in haste. But the most striking thing was the stillness. The air was thick, heavy with enchantment. In the center of the room, where the statue of Rowena Ravenclaw usually stood, there was only an empty pedestal. She's gone, Neville said softly. The statue... McGonagall raised her wand, the light sweeping the room. No, she said after a moment. Not gone. Moved. She pointed toward a faint shimmer near the far wall. The light touched something unseen, an outline, tall and elegant. Slowly, like mist condensing, the statue of Rowena Ravenclaw began to appear, but her eyes glowed faintly blue, and her face was not calm. You have disturbed what was meant to remain hidden, said the statue in a voice that was clear, melodic, and utterly alive. Neville took a step back. It's speaking? McGonagall inclined her head slightly. Lady Ravenclaw, she said with quiet respect, Hogwarts is in peril. The heart beneath the school has awakened, and your bindings are failing. The statue's gaze fixed on her. I know of it. I have felt its pulse for nights uncounted. The others slumber in their portraits, but I remember the heart was our gift and our curse. McGonagall stepped closer. Then you know what must be done. The diadem, Ravenclaw said softly, her stone lips moving as though she still breathed. The crown that bore my wisdom is gone, yet wisdom cannot be destroyed. It lingers, waiting to be claimed. Where? McGonagall asked. The statue lifted one graceful hand and pointed upward toward the ceiling. Above in the tower's peak, the chamber of reflection. But beware, the mind's tests are not kind. You will face not fear of death or pain, but doubt, and doubt breaks faster than stone. Neville straightened. Then we'll face it together. Ravenclaw's lips curved faintly. Bravery and loyalty bound as one. How the founders would have smiled. The light in her eyes dimmed, and her form grew still again. The silence returned. McGonagall turned toward the narrow staircase spiraling higher into the tower. Come, Neville. They climbed in silence, the steps winding upward until the air itself felt thin. The higher they went, the more the castle's heartbeat faded, until it was replaced by another rhythm, the whisper of thoughts not their own. Neville shivered. Professor, do you hear that? Yes, she said, it's the magic of Ravenclaw's chamber. It listens to the mind. They reached a door of pale glass etched with stars. McGonagall touched it lightly, and it opened without a sound. The chamber beyond was breathtaking. Round, vast, its walls made of mirrors that reflected not their bodies, but their memories. In each mirrored surface flickered scenes from their pasts, students, battles, laughter, loss. The air shimmered with silver mist. This place, Neville whispered, it's showing us who we are. McGonagall's gaze hardened. No, it's showing us what it wants us to doubt. From the mirrors, voices began to murmur. McGonagall saw herself in one reflection, years younger, standing beside Dumbledore, her expression stern but uncertain. You could never be him, the reflection said softly. You lead, but without belief. You build, but without faith. McGonagall's hand trembled, though she forced her expression still. You're not real. The mirror cracked, but another voice rose, a boy's, distant yet familiar. You sent us to fight, Minerva. You said it was for Hogwarts. How many fell beneath your watch? Her jaw tightened. Enough, she whispered, but the words shook. Beside her, Neville stood frozen before another mirror. It showed his parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, smiling faintly, whole and unbroken. You could have saved us, the mirror whispered in his mother's voice. You became brave too late. Neville clenched his fists. That's not true, he said, but his voice cracked. Do not listen, McGonagall said, striding toward him. The chamber twists truth into poison. But the reflections multiplied, filling the air with whispers and faces. The walls rippled as though alive, and from the ceiling descended the faint glow of a silver crown, suspended above them in mist. There, Neville said, pointing. The diadem. McGonagall's eyes locked on it. It's the key, she said, but it will not be taken easily. As if hearing her, the reflections broke from the mirrors. They stepped into the room, living illusions of themselves, cold-eyed and perfect. McGonagall faced her double, who smiled faintly. You cannot lead what you no longer believe in. Neville's double stepped forward, eyes filled with pity. You'll fail her, just like you failed them. The illusions moved closer. McGonagall lifted her wand, her voice sharp. Finite incantatum. The spell burst in golden light, but the illusions merely absorbed it, smiling. The chamber laughed with their voices. Then McGonagall drew the sword of Gryffindor from her cloak. The blade sang as she raised it, its crimson and gold light reflecting off 100 mirrored surfaces. Enough, she said. The illusions lunged. McGonagall struck with precision, her sword slicing through her reflection. It shattered like glass, fragments scattering into light. The room shook violently, the other illusions crying out as if struck as well. Neville followed her lead, thrusting his wand toward his own reflection. Expulso. The force blasted the illusion apart. The others vanished in a shimmer of silver mist. When the air grew still, only the crown remained, glowing faintly above them. McGonagall lowered her sword and reached upward. The diadem drifted down into her hands, cold and weightless. Ravenclaw's voice whispered faintly through the air. Wisdom is not found in certainty, but in facing doubt with open eyes. The crown dissolved into light, flowing into the sword of Gryffindor. Its blade blazed brighter still, now threaded with a third hue, silver like moonlight. McGonagall turned to Neville. 3 keys united. 1 remains. He nodded, though his eyes lingered on the fading reflections. Slytherin's locket. Yes, she said, her voice grave. And if the others tested courage, heart, and mind, then his will test our will itself. Below them the castle trembled again, a deep, hollow sound like breath drawn before a scream. The torches flickered, the heartbeat quickened. Hogwarts was waiting for them. The following dawn broke red over the horizon, a warning light that painted the castle's towers in blood-hued fire. The storm had passed, but Hogwarts had not calmed. Doors opened and closed of their own accord. Books whispered in empty classrooms. From the forbidden forest came a deep, distant roar that no creature living could name. McGonagall stood upon the battlements, her cloak whipping in the wind. The sword of Gryffindor hung at her side, gleaming with threads of crimson, gold, and silver light. 3 keys now resided within it: Gryffindor's courage, Hufflepuff's heart, and Ravenclaw's wisdom. Only 1 remained, and the castle was running out of time. Neville joined her, breath misting in the cold. "It's getting worse," he said. "The staircases won't stay still anymore. Filch says the suits of armor are walking the halls again. The portraits can't sleep." McGonagall nodded grimly. "The heart below draws magic from everything it can reach. If we don't seal it soon, Hogwarts will devour itself." He hesitated, then asked, "And the last relic? Slytherin's locket? How can we find something that was destroyed?" She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. When Tom Riddle turned that locket into a Horcrux, he corrupted it beyond repair. But the locket itself was Slytherin's long before Riddle's hand touched it. His destruction broke the vessel, not the source. Salazar's own enchantment may still sleep beneath the Chamber of Secrets. Neville's stomach sank. "You mean we have to go back down there?" "Yes," she said, "to the place where darkness once reigned. It's fitting, perhaps, that Slytherin's gift should lie among serpents." They left the battlements and made their way down through the trembling staircases. Twice they had to stop as steps shifted beneath them, forming spirals that went nowhere. Once, a whispering wind swept through the halls, speaking in a voice that made even McGonagall's blood run cold, soft, sibilant, and ancient. At last they reached the entrance to the second-floor girls' lavatory, long abandoned since the war. The tiles were cracked, the air damp with the smell of stone and mildew. Moaning Myrtle's portrait frame hung askew on the wall, empty. "She's gone?" Neville asked. McGonagall raised her wand. "Moved, perhaps. Spirits wander when the castle is unsettled." She approached the sink and spoke in parcel tongue, a language she had no right to know, but which the castle itself seemed to lend her for a moment. The hissing words coiled through the air, and with a grinding roar, the sink slid aside, revealing the great pipe descending into darkness. "Stay close," she told Neville. "The magic below has changed since Potter last came this way." They slid down the pipe, landing in the vast, echoing tunnel far below the castle. The air was heavy, almost breathing. Bones littered the ground, ancient remains of serpents and beasts. The stones glistened with moisture, reflecting faint green light that pulsed in time with the castle's heartbeat. Neville whispered, "It feels alive." "It is alive," McGonagall said. This was Slytherin's design, living stone, bound to his will. They followed the passage until the serpent-carved doors of the chamber loomed before them. McGonagall raised her wand and hissed again, opening them. The stone serpents slid aside, revealing the vast hall within. The Chamber of Secrets was both beautiful and terrible. The statues of serpents that lined the walls glowed faintly with emerald fire, their eyes bright as coals. Water dripped from the ceiling, pooling around the shattered remains of the basilisk's skeleton. At the far end, the great statue of Salazar Slytherin loomed, tall, solemn, and cold. Its eyes glowed faintly, alive with some buried power. McGonagall stepped forward. "Salazar," she said quietly, "we come not as enemies, but as keepers of Hogwarts. The heart you helped create is unbound. It will destroy everything you built." For a moment, nothing moved. Then the statue's lips parted, and a low voice filled the chamber, slow and heavy as falling stones. "You speak of what you do not understand." Neville stumbled back, eyes wide. McGonagall held her ground. "Then enlighten me." "The heart beneath the castle is no curse," said the voice. "It is the castle's soul. We gave it life so that Hogwarts might endure long after we were dust. You fear it because you have forgotten its purpose. The heart feeds on magic," she said. "It consumes the school. It hungers only when starved." Slytherin's voice replied. "For centuries it slept in peace, nourished by balance, 4 gifts in harmony. But when one was shattered and another defiled, the circle broke. The heart woke hungry." McGonagall's eyes darkened. "Then help us mend it. We have restored 3. Tell me how to restore yours." The statue was silent for a long moment. Then with a sound like grinding stone, its right hand opened, revealing a hollow cavity where something had once been set. "My locket carried my will. Though the vessel is lost, the echo remains. To reclaim it, you must awaken the serpent's guardian." Neville swallowed. "Guardian?" The statue's eyes flared bright green. "The basilisk that once served the air was but a child. Its mother still sleeps in the caverns below. Wake her, and you will find the echo within her heart." Neville paled. "You can't be serious." McGonagall's jaw tightened. "We've come too far to turn back." She raised her wand, tracing a sigil in the air. The ground shuddered violently. Far below, something stirred, something vast, moving through the stone like thunder in the deep. The water rippled. A hiss echoed through the chamber, long and low. Then, with a deafening roar, the floor cracked open. From the depths rose a massive shape, scaled and ancient, eyes glowing like lanterns. The mother of serpents unfurled before them, her body coiling through the ruins of her nest. Neville stumbled backward, but McGonagall held her wand steady, her expression hard as iron. "Salazar Slytherin," she called, "your guardian answers. Show us the path." The serpent lowered her great head, fangs gleaming. Her voice was a whisper of wind and thunder. "Who disturbs my rest?" "Minerva McGonagall," she said firmly, "protector of Hogwarts. I seek the echo of your master's locket. The basilisk's eyes burned brighter. Then you seek my heart, but it is bound by blood and fear. To take it, you must face both. Without warning, the serpent struck, lightning fast. McGonagall barely rolled aside, the creature's fangs piercing the stone where she'd stood. Neville shouted a spell, blasting shards of rock into the air. McGonagall sprang to her feet. "We cannot kill her," she shouted. "We need her heart." The serpent reared back, coils shuddering. "Then prove yourselves worthy." The fight was chaos, spells flaring against scales, firelight glancing off wet stone. The basilisk struck again and again, faster than any mortal creature, each movement shaking the chamber. Neville's spells ricocheted harmlessly off her armor. Finally, McGonagall raised the sword of Gryffindor. "Forgive me, Salazar," she whispered, and drove the blade toward the serpent's breast, not to wound, but to pierce the glowing mark there. The basilisk screamed. Light erupted from the wound, not red but green, spiraling upward to the ceiling. The serpent's body shuddered once, then stilled. When the glow faded, McGonagall withdrew the blade. Embedded in its steel was a fourth light, emerald green, coiling like smoke. The basilisk's voice came again, faint now. "The echo is yours. Restore what we began." The serpent sank slowly back into the depths, the water closing over her. Neville exhaled, trembling. "Is it done?" McGonagall gazed at the sword. 4 colors now gleamed upon its blade: crimson, gold, silver, and green. It shimmered with a living light. "Yes," she said softly, "the 4 are one again." Above them the castle groaned. The heartbeat that had shaken the halls for days grew louder, deeper, as though calling them. Neville looked up at the ceiling. "It's awake, Professor." McGonagall nodded. "Then it is time to face it." The great doors of the chamber closed behind them as they began their ascent back to the surface. The ground trembled with each beat of the heart, shaking dust from the ancient stones. The 4 lights in the sword pulsed as one, and McGonagall's eyes burned with resolve. For the first time since the war, she felt the power of all Hogwarts founders standing beside her. But even as they rose toward the trembling light above, a new sound joined the heartbeat, soft, deliberate, and unmistakably human. Someone else was waiting for them. They climbed back toward the surface in silence, the echo of the serpent's dying cry still lingering through the tunnels. Water dripped from the ceiling, rhythmic and relentless, mingling with the low, thunderous heartbeat that now pulsed through every stone of the castle. The sword of Gryffindor, bright with 4-fold light, cast dancing shadows on the walls. McGonagall carried it like a torch of the founders themselves. Neville followed close, his wand steady but his steps uncertain. He could feel it now. Hogwarts was no longer still. The castle breathed around them, the stairways, the corridors, even the stones beneath their feet shifted and trembled as though preparing for something vast and ancient. When they reached the upper corridors once more, the change was clear. The castle's walls glowed faintly, veins of gold and green light running like blood through their surfaces. Portraits whispered in terror. The air trembled with power. Professor Flitwick met them at the end of the corridor, his tiny frame rigid with alarm. "Minerva, thank heavens. Where in Merlin's name have you been?" McGonagall's face was grave. "Gather the staff, Filius. The final binding must be done now, or it will be too late." Flitwick's eyes darted to the sword in her hand, its blade alive with shifting color. So it's true then? The relics? All 4 restored, she said, but the castle will not wait for us. It calls. Flitwick nodded once, grave and fearful, and hurried away. Neville looked to McGonagall. Where do we go? To the heart itself, she said. Below the Great Hall, the place where the Founder's magic first joined. They descended swiftly through the trembling corridors. By the time they reached the Great Hall, the floor was quaking like the deck of a ship in storm. The enchanted ceiling flashed with lightning, not from the sky but from within. The long tables were overturned, plates shattered, banners torn. The ghosts of Hogwarts hovered near the walls, pale and silent, watching. At the far end stood the remaining professors, Flitwick, Slughorn, Sprout, and Hagrid, each clutching a wand or staff, their faces pale with awe and dread. Is it time? Sprout asked. McGonagall nodded. We will open the path together. Once begun, none of us can step back. The professors formed a circle in the center of the hall. McGonagall raised the sword, its 4 colors blazing against the stormlight. By the courage of Gryffindor, she intoned, the heart shall know no fear. Sprout lifted her wand, voice steady. By the kindness of Hufflepuff, it shall not hunger. Flitwick followed, his tone clear and bright. By the wisdom of Ravenclaw, it shall not stray. And Slughorn, his hand trembling, added, by the will of Slytherin, it shall not fall. As the last words were spoken, the stones beneath them split open. A beam of white light burst upward, filling the hall with blinding brilliance. Wind howled through the rift, carrying whispers in 100 voices, students, founders, even the echoes of those long gone. The floor fell away, revealing a vast chasm beneath, and at its center, suspended in the air, pulsed the living heart of Hogwarts, a sphere of molten gold and shadow, immense and terrible. Its light washed over them in waves that made their skin crawl. Neville stared in awe. That's it, the heart. McGonagall's jaw was set, the soul of the school. But as she stepped forward, another voice spoke, a voice soft, elegant, and chillingly familiar. Step back, headmistress. From the shadows beyond the chasm, a figure emerged. The light caught his face, and Neville gasped. Malfoy? Draco Malfoy stood before them, wand drawn, his robes tattered, his expression wild with strain. You shouldn't have come here, he said. The heart's power, do you feel it? It doesn't destroy. It gives. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. What have you done? He laughed, bitter and broken. After the war, after everything, you think Hogwarts could just return to peace? You rebuilt the stones, Minerva, but not the soul. The heart called to me. It promised to make it whole again. Neville stepped forward. You can't control that thing. I already have, Malfoy said. The castle answers me now. It listens to those who still bleed for it. The ground trembled, and for an instant the glowing veins along the walls flared green. Statues moved in the corners of the hall, eyes glowing faintly as if awaiting command. McGonagall's voice cut through the roar. Draco, listen to me. The heart does not grant power. It consumes it. You are feeding it your soul. He hesitated, wand hand shaking. No, I can control it. I've learned its language, its rhythm. It obeys. Then order it to stop, she said. The light around the heart pulsed violently, a rhythm that shook the air itself. The statues began to march forward, knights, gargoyles, and shattered armor, all drawn to the living power. Malfoy staggered, pressing a hand to his temple. It's listening to all of us. Draco, Neville shouted. Let go. Malfoy looked up, his eyes glinting green in the strange light. "You think Hogwarts belongs only to the light?" he whispered. "No, it was built on balance. Without shadow, there is no dawn." Then the heart burst outward in a wave of blinding radiance. Magic screamed through the air, tearing at the walls, splitting the floor. The professors were thrown back, spells scattering like sparks. McGonagall landed hard, the sword still in her grasp. The colors along its blade burned like fire. "Neville," she called, "the sword, raise it to the heart." He scrambled to her side, clutching the hilt with her. Together they lifted it high. The blade shone brighter than any spell, the four colors twisting into a single beam of white light. "By the Founder's bond," McGonagall cried, "we bind the heart anew." The light struck the heart. It convulsed, screaming, a sound not of pain but of release. The statues froze, the walls ceased trembling, and for one endless moment the great hall was filled with pure, blinding brilliance. When the light faded, silence followed. Dust drifted through the air. The chasm had sealed itself, smooth and unbroken. McGonagall stood in the center of the hall, her robes torn, the sword dim in her hand. Neville lay nearby, bruised but alive. The professors stirred, groaning. Malfoy knelt at the far side of the hall, his wand fallen. His eyes were clear now, haunted but free of the green light. McGonagall approached him slowly. "Draco?" He looked up at her, voice hoarse. "It's gone. I felt it leave me. The heart, it's quiet now." She nodded. "Because it is healed? You gave it what it needed, a spark of remorse?" He managed a weak, bitter laugh. "Then Hogwarts has a cruel taste for irony." "Perhaps," she said softly, "but it has always had a heart of its own." The first rays of dawn spilled through the shattered windows, touching the sword in her hand. For the first time in many days, the castle stood still. Neville rose, wiping dust from his sleeve. "Is it over?" McGonagall looked around, the hall, the walls, the light. "For now," she said quietly. "The Founder's magic endures, and so does Hogwarts." She turned toward the vast, silent hall, her voice carrying through the still air. "Rest now," she whispered to the castle. "You are safe." The torches flared softly in answer, and somewhere in the deep unseen below their feet, a single heartbeat echoed once more, steady, gentle, and at peace. The days that followed were unlike any Hogwarts had ever known. The castle, though calm, seemed changed, its silence deeper, its shadows longer. The tremors had ceased, the walls no longer pulsed with living light, but an air of awe clung to every corridor. Students spoke in hushed voices, as though afraid to wake something ancient that now slumbered below. McGonagall stood at the highest tower one mist-veiled morning, gazing across the vast grounds. From here she could see everything: the glimmer of the Black Lake, the dark sweep of the Forbidden Forest, the patchwork of fields still scarred by war. Yet now beneath it all, she sensed a steadiness, a heartbeat quiet but sure, as though the castle itself were breathing peacefully once more. Neville approached from behind, a mug of tea in each hand. "You've been up here since dawn," he said gently, offering her one. "Old habits die hard," she replied, her eyes still on the horizon. "For the first time in months, Hogwarts sleeps." He smiled faintly. "It's good to see it alive again." "Alive, yes," she murmured, "but never the same." The sword of Gryffindor rested beside her on the stone balustrade, its four colors dim now, yet not gone. When sunlight touched it, the faintest shimmer of crimson, gold, silver, and green ran along its edge, The relic's unity had mended the heart of the school, but in doing so, something deeper had changed. She lifted the blade slightly, feeling its balance. "The founders left us more than relics," she said. "They left a choice, to wield their legacy or to be ruled by it. I sometimes wonder if Hogwarts has forgiven us for what we nearly did." Neville leaned on the railing. "If it hadn't been for you, there wouldn't be anything left to forgive." She gave him a wry glance. "You've grown wiser, Neville Longbottom." He chuckled softly. "Not wiser, perhaps, just older. The kind of older that comes from seeing too much magic for one lifetime." A shadow passed across the sun then, drawing their eyes downward. A lone owl circled above the great hall before alighting on the parapet near them. It carried a sealed parchment, the wax marked with the crest of the Ministry of Magic. McGonagall took it, breaking the seal with a sigh. Her eyes moved swiftly across the page, her expression unreadable. Neville waited. "Bad news?" "Curious news," she said at last. "The Ministry's Department of Mysteries reports an energy surge. A magical resonance detected from beneath the castle. They wish to investigate." Neville straightened. "They can't. If they disturb the heart again—" "I know," she said, folding the letter. "But they will not be dissuaded easily. Wizards have always been drawn to what they don't understand. Then we'll stop them." McGonagall's gaze softened. "We'll try." They left the tower together, descending through staircases that shifted now only slightly, as though with tired dreams. The castle seemed to watch them pass, portraits bowing their painted heads, ghosts gliding in reverent silence. The fat friar gave them a cheery wave, but even he spoke quietly, as if afraid to disturb the calm. In the great hall, a group of ministry envoys waited. They were dressed in deep blue robes marked with silver runes, the insignia of the unspeakables. Their leader, a tall witch with dark hair and sharp gray eyes, stepped forward. "Headmistress McGonagall," she said briskly. "Aurora Vale, Department of Mysteries. We've come to survey the anomaly beneath Hogwarts." "Anomaly?" McGonagall repeated. "You mean the heart?" Vale hesitated. "We prefer to call it a source of unidentified magical energy. It spiked again 3 nights ago, briefly but powerfully enough to be felt in London." Neville frowned. "It's stabilizing. You'll only make it worse by interfering." The witch's eyes flicked to him. "Professor Longbottom, is it?" "We don't intend to interfere, only to study." McGonagall folded her arms. "Hogwarts is not a laboratory. Whatever lies beneath this castle is bound by magic older than the Ministry itself. I will not risk it being tampered with." Vale's tone cooled. "Headmistress, with respect, the Ministry has authority to—" "The Ministry," McGonagall interrupted, "has authority over wizards, not over Hogwarts. This castle answers to no man or law. It protects itself." The two women stared at one another, and the air between them seemed to tremble. Finally, Vale inclined her head. "Very well, but if the readings rise again, we'll return, with or without permission." McGonagall's reply was calm but steel-edged. "Then pray they do not." The envoys departed soon after, their footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. Neville exhaled. "They'll be back." "Yes," McGonagall said softly, "and next time Hogwarts may not be so forgiving." For several days afterward, the school remained quiet. The tremors did not return, and the students, who had been kept largely unaware of the truth, resumed their lessons. Yet McGonagall could not shake the feeling that the peace was a thin one. One night, near the hour of midnight, she found herself once again descending the stairs to the dungeons. The castle was still, but the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the halls. She carried the sword with her, its dim light guiding her way. She stopped before the spot where the great hall had once opened to reveal the chasm of the heart. Now the floor was smooth and unbroken, but when she pressed her hand to it, she felt warmth, a pulse faint as the flutter of wings. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, "but thank you." The floor beneath her palm trembled slightly, not in warning but in acknowledgement. A gentle thrum passed through the stone as though the castle were breathing with her. She smiled faintly. "Rest, old friend. You've earned it." As she turned to leave, the torches lining the corridor flared one by one, their flames burning steady and gold. For a moment she thought she saw shadows moving along the walls, 4 tall figures standing together, their outlines wreathed in light. Gryffindor's proud stance, Hufflepuff's warm smile, Ravenclaw's wise, calm eyes, and Slytherin's stern, watchful gaze. Then the vision faded, and the hall was empty once more. McGonagall climbed back toward her office, the weight of years resting on her shoulders, yet somehow lighter than before. The castle no longer whispered in fear. It hummed softly, peacefully, like a living thing at rest. And though she knew that the mysteries of Hogwarts could never truly be contained, she also knew this: it would endure, as it always had, so long as there were those willing to defend it. Outside, dawn was breaking again. Light spilled over the mountains, turning the mist gold. The towers gleamed. Somewhere deep below, the heart of Hogwarts beat slow and steady, no longer a wound, but a promise. And for the first time since the war, Minerva McGonagall let herself believe that peace, however fragile, might at last be real. Winter crept over Hogwarts like a slow enchantment. Frost rimed the battlements, the lake froze in silver mirrors, and the forbidden forest lay still beneath a mantle of white. Snow fell soft and unhurried across the turrets and bridges, quieting every sound until the castle seemed to dream. The weeks since the restoration had passed in uneasy peace. The ministry had kept its distance, the students had returned to laughter, and the torches once more burned bright in every corridor. Yet for all its calm, the castle had changed. Magic still ran through its veins like blood, quieter now, but deeper. The professors could feel it when they cast charms. The walls responded with warmth, the air shimmered faintly with light. McGonagall watched it all from her office window one evening. Snow drifted in slow spirals past the glass, catching the glow of candlelight. The sword of Gryffindor hung above her desk, suspended within a crystal case. The 4 colors along its blade, crimson, gold, silver, and green, flickered softly like sleeping embers. She set down her quill, rubbing her temples. Letters from the ministry lay scattered before her, each bearing the same plea in different words. Allow us to study the phenomenon beneath the castle. She had refused them all. The fire crackled behind her, and from the wall came a familiar voice. "Still awake, Minerva?" She turned toward Dumbledore's portrait. The painted headmaster smiled gently, his blue eyes twinkling as they had in life. "I was beginning to think you'd grown bored of my company," she said. "Never," he replied, his voice like the soft rustle of parchment. "I was only waiting for the right moment to speak. The castle feels different now, stronger yet older. You've done well," she sighed. "We've bought peace, perhaps, but for how long?" "Peace is never permanent," he said. "It's merely time to heal, to learn, and to remember." Her gaze lingered on the sword. Hogwarts remembers everything. Sometimes I think that's the burden of this place. It feels too much. It mourns as we do. And so it should, said Dumbledore softly. That is what makes it alive. Before she could answer, the fire guttered suddenly low. The warmth in the room faded, and a faint tremor passed through the stones beneath her feet. It was subtle, barely a heartbeat, but unmistakable. McGonagall stood at once. No, she whispered. Not again. Dumbledore's painted brows furrowed. Do you feel it? Yes. She snatched her wand, hurrying to the window. Snow swirled outside, but beyond the drifting white, a faint light pulsed in the distance, beneath the great hall. Within moments, she was striding through the corridors, her robes billowing behind her. The portraits whispered as she passed, faces pale. The heart stirs, cried a painted monk. The castle calls. By the time she reached the great hall, Neville and Professors Sprout and Flitwick were already there, drawn by the same tremor. The floor glowed faintly with veins of gold light. Neville looked up, alarmed. It's starting again? No, McGonagall said, though she wasn't certain. This feels different, quieter, calling, not crying. They knelt as one, pressing their palms to the stone. Beneath their hands, the magic throbbed faintly, warm as living flesh. Then slowly, the light gathered, forming words, ancient runes that shimmered upon the floor. Flitwick gasped. It's a message, Sprout squinted. What does it say? McGonagall's lips moved as she translated. Guardians endure where gratitude remains. The glow dimmed, the warmth faded, the castle grew still once more. Neville exhaled shakily. Guardians endure? Does it mean us? Perhaps, McGonagall said, or perhaps it means itself. Flitwick stood, eyes shining with wonder. Minerva, this is no warning. It's thanks. The truth of it struck her. The heart was not awakening in anger, but speaking. It was acknowledging them. Sprout smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. Hogwarts is alive again, and it remembers kindness. For a long time they stood in silence, the snow falling beyond the tall windows. The castle breathed around them, content, at peace. In the days that followed, strange blessings began to ripple through the school. The greenhouses yielded twice their usual bloom, even in the frost. The staircases no longer tricked first years, moving instead with gentle predictability. The ghosts, who once drifted in sorrow, now hummed softly as they passed, as though lulled by a hidden song. Neville noticed it first, the air of warmth that seemed to follow McGonagall wherever she walked. The students did too. They said the castle itself looked after her now. The torches burned brighter when she entered a room. She dismissed it with a brisk word, but in her quiet moments, she felt it. The castle's gratitude pulsed through her like a heartbeat, not her own. One evening, a week before Christmas, she found herself walking the grounds alone. The snow lay deep and unbroken, and the moon painted the world in silver light. From the forest's edge came the faint hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through pine. She stopped by the ancient well in the lower field, the same where Hufflepuff's binding had once failed. It stood half buried in snow, its stones rimed with frost. She brushed them with a gloved hand, and the faintest glimmer answered her touch. I hope you're resting, she said softly. The snow shifted beside her, and she turned sharply, but it was only Neville, bundled in a thick cloak, his cheeks red from the cold. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Not tonight. He smiled faintly. You know, the students have started calling the castle she again. They say she's watching over them. McGonagall's lips curved. Then perhaps the old magic truly is awake. Neville's breath misted in the air. It feels different here now, not haunted, just whole. She looked toward the castle, its windows glowing warmly against the snow. That's all I ever wanted. They stood together in silence, the world hushed around them. Above, stars burned cold and steady, and beneath their feet, the faint pulse of Hogwarts' heart beat in rhythm with their own. At last Neville spoke. "Do you think it'll ever sleep again?" McGonagall's gaze lingered on the castle. "No," she said quietly. "Not truly. But that's all right. Some hearts aren't meant for rest. They're meant to keep watch." He nodded, and they turned back toward the castle, footprints trailing through the snow. The great oak doors opened before them of their own accord, light spilling warmly into the night. As they stepped inside, the torches flared in welcome. Somewhere deep below, unseen, the heart of Hogwarts beat slow and steady, a sound not of warning or fear, but of promise. The castle dreamed again, not in sorrow, but in hope. And above it all, Minerva McGonagall walked its halls, like its living guardian, the keeper of its heart, and the last echo of its founder's grace. Spring returned to Hogwarts in slow, shy colors. The frost retreated from the meadows, and tender shoots of grass pushed through the thawing soil. The black lake rippled again beneath the sun, its surface no longer hard with ice, but shining like glass. Birds returned to the towers, filling the morning air with their songs. The castle, reborn from its winter silence, seemed to breathe in time with the awakening world. For McGonagall, the passing months had been a strange peace. The tremors had not returned. The walls of the castle no longer glowed with restless magic. Yet the presence of the heart was never far from her mind. In quiet moments she felt it. Still, a faint warmth underfoot, a subtle pulse in the stone. It was not threatening now, only alive, as though Hogwarts herself kept watch with her. The sword of Gryffindor hung above her desk, as it always had. But lately its fourfold gleam had dimmed, not from weakness but from rest, as if even the blade understood the piece did not require brilliance. One late afternoon, as the sunlight slanted gold through her window, a knock came at the office door. "Enter," she called. Neville stepped inside, holding a rolled parchment sealed with deep green wax. His face was thoughtful, his robes dusted with soil from the greenhouses. "It's from the ministry," he said, offering the letter. McGonagall broke the seal, scanning the page. "They want to send another inspection team," she murmured. "Something about residual readings in the castle's foundations." Neville frowned. "They still don't understand, do they?" "No," she said quietly. "They never will. Magic like this, old, self-born, it cannot be measured or contained. It must simply be trusted." She set the letter aside. "I'll deal with them. For now, we tend to our own work." He smiled faintly. "Always the steady one, Professor." "Someone must be," she replied, though a trace of amusement softened her tone. As evening fell, they walked the grounds together. The air smelled of new grass and rain. Beyond the greenhouses, the great oak stood budding with pale leaves, its branches whispering softly in the breeze. Students crossed the lawns in laughing clusters, their voices carrying on the wind an echo of life returned. "It feels different this year," Neville said. "Lighter. The students aren't afraid anymore." McGonagall nodded. "Hogwarts remembers peace as well as war. It teaches both." They paused by the well, the same ancient ring of stone that had once held Hufflepuff's binding. Ivy had grown thick over it again, yet when the sunlight touched it, faint gold shimmered beneath the leaves. Neville crouched beside it, brushing the vines aside. "It's still warm," he murmured. McGonagall laid a hand on the rim. A pulse answered her touch, gentle, calm, almost affectionate. "It watches us," she said softly, "not as master nor as servant, as guardian." A silence stretched between them. Then distant and sudden came a sharp cry from the direction of the lake. They turned. A group of first years stood at the shore, pointing in alarm. The water was churning, dark ripples spiraling outward from the center. McGonagall and Neville ran toward it. By the time they reached the bank, the ripples had calmed, leaving only stillness and a faint shimmer upon the water. Beneath the surface, something glowed. Neville's eyes widened. "What is that?" McGonagall's expression tightened. "A memory, perhaps. Or a message." She knelt, extending her wand. "Ascendio." The water rose in a column, twisting upward like liquid glass. Within it hung a vision, 4 figures standing side by side, faint and radiant, their outlines shifting like candlelight. The Founders, Gryffindor's proud bearing, Hufflepuff's gentle smile, Ravenclaw's calm grace, and Slytherin's piercing gaze, all woven from light and mist. The students gasped, stepping back, but McGonagall stood still, transfixed. Rowena Ravenclaw's voice came first, soft as wind through stone. "The heart endures through balance. Let those who follow remember, strength without compassion, wisdom without humility, or ambition without restraint shall break what we built." Then Helga Hufflepuff spoke. "Hogwarts lives because you loved her. Guard that love, and she will guard you." Gryffindor's tone was proud, warm. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to stand even when the world trembles. And last came Slytherin, his voice deep as the earth. "Our legacy is not blood nor name, but choice. Choose well, or the heart will remember." The vision flickered, then faded, dissolving into motes of gold that fell like rain back into the lake. The water rippled once, then lay still. Neville exhaled. Did that really happen?" McGonagall looked out across the lake. "The castle speaks through its founders. It reminds us of what we nearly forgot." The first years stared in awe, whispering among themselves. McGonagall turned to them, her voice steady but kind. "What you have seen is not a warning. It is a promise. Hogwarts endures, and so must we." That night, word of the vision spread through the school like fire. The older students repeated it in common rooms and corridors. The younger ones whispered it in their dormitories before sleep. By morning, the fear that had once shadowed the castle was gone entirely, replaced by something stronger, a sense of belonging, as if every stone of Hogwarts had become part of them. Weeks passed. Spring deepened into summer. Flowers bloomed along the pathways, and the grounds shimmered with color. When the end of term arrived, the great hall overflowed with light and laughter. The enchanted ceiling reflected a golden sunset, and the students' voices rose in joyful chaos. McGonagall stood at the head table, listening with quiet pride. For all that she had endured, for all that the castle had suffered, this moment, the living proof of hope, was her reward. When the feast ended and the last of the students departed for the holidays, she lingered alone in the hall. The torches burned low, casting a soft glow across the familiar stones. She traced a hand along the wall, feeling the faint warmth of the heart within. "You did well," she murmured. "We both did." A gust of wind stirred the banners overhead. Somewhere above, the chandeliers swayed, scattering flecks of light like stars. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile, and turned toward the doors. As she walked away, the faint sound of a heartbeat followed. Slow, strong, eternal. The castle watched her go, its heart steady, its soul alive. And though centuries would come and pass, though new headmasters and students would walk its halls, Hogwarts would remember the woman who had mended its soul, the guardian who had faced the living heart and chosen against all odds to love it. For as long as the castle stood, her name would be whispered not in fear or legend, but in gratitude. Minerva McGonagall, the keeper of the heart. The summer sun lingered long over the highlands, painting Hogwarts in shades of gold and rose as it sank beyond the mountains. The castle gleamed like a dream against the fading light, each tower haloed in fire, each window aglow with gentle warmth. It was a season of stillness, of rare quiet when even the restless ghosts seemed content to drift in silence. McGonagall walked the halls alone that evening. Her footsteps echoed faintly through the empty corridors where portraits slumbered in their frames and suits of armor stood sentinel, unmoving. The school term had ended 2 weeks before. The students were gone, and with them the constant murmur of laughter, footsteps, and whispered spells. She did not mind the solitude. It was the sort of silence she had once feared. Too vast, too heavy, but now it felt companionable, almost kind. Hogwarts no longer watched her with trembling breath. It breathed steadily, softly, as if asleep beside her. She carried a lantern, though the castle lit her path of its own accord, torches flaring gently to life as she passed, fading again when she moved beyond them. The air was cool and faintly perfumed with the scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a storm was brewing over the hills. Her walk led her, as it often did, to the great hall. It stood empty now, vast and echoing, but alive with memory. The enchanted ceiling shimmered with stars, clear and bright, against a velvet sky. The long tables gleamed with polish, awaiting the next feast. She paused at the dais, resting a hand upon the back of her chair. "So much," she murmured to the empty room, "and yet it endures." From the far end of the hall, the faintest rustle stirred. A portrait had opened its eyes. It was one few noticed, a quiet painting tucked behind the banners of Gryffindor and Slytherin both. It showed an ancient courtyard beneath a twilight sky, and in it stood the 4 founders of Hogwarts. They were not still tonight. Gryffindor's painted form stepped forward, his eyes bright as molten gold. "You have done what even we could not," he said. "You've given the heart its balance again." Helga Hufflepuff's warm smile followed, and with kindness, not power. Rowena Ravenclaw inclined her head, her gaze thoughtful. Wisdom often lies not in knowing but in understanding when to act. "You chose well, Minerva." But it was Salazar Slytherin's voice that held her still, deep and low yet not unkind. "You saw the truth of it. The heart was never meant to be chained. It was meant to be trusted. Even I had forgotten that." McGonagall bowed her head slightly. "I only did what I must. Hogwarts has always been greater than any of us." "Perhaps," said Ravenclaw softly, "but she will remember you. The castle knows its guardians, and she will whisper your name in the stones for generations to come." Before McGonagall could answer, a low rumble shook the hall, the gentle roll of thunder from the storm outside. Lightning flashed briefly through the windows, and the 4 figures in the portrait shimmered as if caught in the glow. Then Gryffindor smiled. "It is time we rest again. Farewell, Keeper of the Heart." The portrait faded into stillness once more. McGonagall stood for a long while, the sound of rain beginning to patter faintly on the roof above. At last she turned and left the hall, her lantern casting soft golden circles along the floor. She descended into the dungeons next, down corridors of cool stone where the air smelled of earth and damp moss. Few came here now. Even the Slytherin common room sealed for the summer stood silent behind its hidden door. At the lowest point of the castle, beneath layers of rock and memory, she found what she sought, a narrow archway behind an old tapestry leading into a small, circular chamber. Here the stones glowed, faintly of their own accord, warm with the pulse of the castle's living heart. The air thrummed with quiet life, the same soft rhythm she'd come to know. The heartbeat of Hogwarts echoed through the floor, steady and calm. McGonagall set down her lantern and knelt, placing a hand upon the glowing stones. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Rest easy, old friend." The warmth beneath her hand deepened. For an instant she felt the faintest flicker of thought, not words, not sound, but something deeper, gratitude, recognition. Then it faded, leaving only the pulse of living magic. She rose, brushing dust from her robes, and took one last look around the chamber. The air shimmered faintly with unseen light, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw the outline of 4 figures standing there beside her, watching, proud and at peace. Then they were gone. When she returned to her office, the storm had broken. Rain lashed the windows and wind howled against the towers, but the castle stood unshaken. The fire in her hearth burned low, casting long shadows across the floor. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat at her desk, letting the quiet fill the room. Her eyes drifted to the sword of Gryffindor, still suspended in its crystal case. Its edge caught the firelight, glinting faintly, and for a moment she thought she saw movement within the steel. 4 threads of color intertwining like breath, crimson, gold, silver, and green. She smiled.
"Well," she said softly, "I suppose you've earned your rest too." A knock came at the door. "Come in," she called. Neville entered, damp from the rain, but grinning all the same. "Still awake, headmistress?" "Barely," she said, though her eyes were warm. "What brings you here at this hour?" "I thought you might like some company," he said simply. "The castle feels alive tonight. I couldn't sleep." She gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Then sit. It's been a long year for us both." He did, and for a while they said nothing. The rain tapped gently at the glass, the fire crackled, and the sword gleamed softly in its case. After a time, Neville spoke. "Do you think it's over? Truly over?" McGonagall regarded the flames. "No. Magic like this never ends. It changes, it grows, it sleeps, but it does not die. Hogwarts will live as long as there is someone who believes in her." He nodded slowly. "Then she'll live forever." Outside, thunder rolled again, distant and fading. The rain softened to a steady whisper, and the castle settled deeper into its calm. When Neville finally left, McGonagall remained by the fire, watching the embers burn low. She thought of the years that had passed, of all she had lost and gained, of the countless students who would yet walk these halls. The world beyond might change 1,000 times, but Hogwarts, this strange, wonderful living place, would endure,
At last she rose, extinguishing the lamps one by one. She paused at the door, casting a final glance at the sword. The blade shimmered faintly, alive even in shadow. "Good night," she whispered, to the castle, to its heart, to all that had been and all that would come. The torches dimmed, the wind quieted, and somewhere deep below, the heart of Hogwarts answered with a single steady beat. And thus the castle slept again, dreaming not of sorrow or loss, but of courage, friendship, and the unbroken light of those who had kept its flame. The legacy of Minerva McGonagall, the keeper of the heart, would live in every stone, every whispered spell, every laughter-filled corridor, for as long as Hogwarts stood beneath the stars.